Anyway, okay, we better get going. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. My name is Peter James. I'm the Director of Career Life Transitions, and our webinar this morning is talking about the strategic approach to managing the ageing workforce. We've been running a number of workshops over the last 6 months, especially with some large corporations. Really helping them and their employees, their aging employees, start to make some key decisions and open that conversation with each other about the whole process of retirement. So I want to talk to you through a couple of aspects of that, and obviously from the employer's point of view and from the potential retiree or the older workforce point of view, and looking at it in terms of, well, if you want to keep the workforce, what are the kind of things you want to do? If you want to keep and employ the workforce, or on the other side of it, are you prepared for that workforce to start retiring? So a couple of questions for you, and I would strongly suggest you consider this moving forward. Do you know what percentage of your workforce is over 50? We're working with a large organisation with them, around about 4,000 people in it. And when they did the numbers on this, they found that over 30% of the workforce were over 55 years old. That's quite a substantial amount of people. Do you know what the retirement plans for those people? And do you have systems and processes in place to manage health and safety for older workers, brand management strategies for exiting employees, resource planning, knowledge retention, succession planning? If you don't know the answer to these questions, then your business may be at risk in some way, and we'll talk about why. But don't despair, you're not alone. Many businesses have really stuck their head in the sand when it comes to managing the retiring and aging workforce. It's an exceptional challenges for employers and employees at the moment. And I mean, these are worldwide trends. In 2016, the world's advanced economy reached a milestone. In other words, the combined working age population is now below the population over 65 years old. So in other words, we have much more and more of the baby boomers coming through that are moving into retirement or the potential for retirement, and less working population to sustain and maintain that. And that starts to become a risk for economies, and hence the reason why superannuation is continuing to rise, where there is a massive encouragement for the government to ensure people are saving and working towards their own retirement. But it's not working all that well at the moment, and I'll go through some of the reasons why shortly. But here are some of the facts. Australia's workforce is ageing and growth is slowing. So in 1970, 7.5 working age employees for every person 65 and over. By 2050, there'll be 2.7 working age employees for every person 65 and over, which means that, I guess, the economy, the strength of the economy, tax, all of that covers pensions and whatnot, the size of the population generating the income is massively reducing, while the size of the population looking toward that support from government possibly is increasing. And we are getting older and older. So in 1930, 63 years was the average life expectancy. You didn't even make it to retirement, mostly. In 1970, that was 71 years. That's 6 years beyond retirement. Now in 2021, it's 84 years. That's 19 years beyond retirement. And I don't know if you know it, but the fastest growing demographic group in Australia is people over 100. So we're getting older, living longer, living healthier, but we're also worried about things. We're worried about money. We're worried about how we're going to survive and how we're going to live as we move into retirement. So here are the issues as I see them. For employees, really these days with laws and discrimination laws and what have you, you can't raise the subject of retirement. You can't directly ask someone or tell someone they're going to retire. You don't want to be seen as discriminating. Many companies don't actually understand if they do or don't have an issue. It's a minefield of possible industrial strife. Are there safety issues around this? I mean, I've seen 74-year-old fellows out the field still changing out pumps and things like that. Younger managers don't know how to talk to older employees, and many times when I'm talking to groups of potential retirees in organisations, 90% of them are reporting to younger managers. I understand at the moment we are massively resource constrained, so we don't actually know whether we want to or can afford people to retire. Who's going to be moving to replace those roles? And we can't necessarily let people go. They may be the only ones that know about this or that, or know where this valve was placed, or who made a decision about that, or where this information is stored. So that's the employer's issues. From the employee's point of view, they're thinking, well, I got caught out in the GFC, I need to keep working. And this massive question, do I have enough money to retire? That they could live another 30 years in retirement, that they may not be ready to retire because as we are healthier and our life expectancy expands, then at 60 and 70, people are still feeling like they've got a lot to contribute, which they do to work and to their own lives. Things have changed so fast locally and globally, they don't know what to do. They don't know who to trust for advice. They don't actually understand what retirement means. They're looking out for themselves. And what we're finding is a lot of people are now starting to sacrifice what I call their active retirement for an additional income. And they've really turned the money into a goal rather than an enabler. And most people we speak to don't understand their superannuation, they don't understand financial planning, and they don't understand how Social Security and Centrelink works or what's available. And they're making some really poor decisions based on the rumours and what they've heard and the Bush lawyers and what have you over the years. Facts of the matter are, super, financial planning, Centrelink are changing every 3 to 6 months. So what you heard 10 years ago about financial planning and Centrelink may not apply. So there's lots and lots of concerns, and a lot of it is based on just an absolute lack of communication and information. So it really leads to organisations wondering how to deal with the issues, and retiring employees trying to figure out how they can stay in control. They're worried that if they mention retirement to the business may turn around and say, right, great, you're out the door. And as I say, so it's really kind of broken down this communication. HR and organisations know they can't have certain conversations. And so the end result of that is everyone has said nothing, basically, or just let things go along. And I noticed even one of the questions that you've submitted was, is it possible to approach a worker who is over 70 and ask their time frame for retirement? Or in specific terms? No, it's not. It's not, I mean, you could get yourself into trouble for doing something like that. One thing we cannot deny is that there are biological effects of aging. And these are the things, if you are looking at an aging workforce, dropping an aging workforce, which is safe for employees in their 20s and 30s, may be an issue. Working with one of the very, very large organizations, mining company, where the average age of the employees is 58, and their lifetime injuries was up around 40, and it was mostly just twisted ankles from jumping out of trucks and things like that. So there are biological effects of aging, and if you have an aging workforce, or you're looking to encourage an aging workforce coming back into your workplace, you need to take these things into account. Loss of balance, muscular strength, cognitive decline, hearing loss, things like that. They are a fact of life. We're all getting older, and I guess the most difficult thing about it is that for everybody, this biological aging effect is completely different. I know that I've met people in there that are 95 that are very, very astute and completely with it, and I've met people who are in their late 60s who really are struggling. So trying to sort of look at that 30-year period and say, well, at what point are we in this aging process? So here are the numbers in terms of a business case. When we're focusing on mature age workers, there are a number of options that may lead to separation from the company. So there's voluntary separation, involuntary separation, and a work-related injury claim. So optimal is voluntary resignation, retirement, or other options represent an incremental and avoidable expense to the business. If a business needs to make a role redundant, you've attracted a redundancy payout. But it's interesting, 60% of mature workers come to work with a chronic condition. There's a risk that workers may make a compensation claim. And we'll have a look at some of those numbers as well. So what this slide is really saying is that to open up the conversation and have people naturally move into retirement is your cheapest and the easiest option. And starting to open those lines of communication without being directive in terms of those kind of questionings is the balance you're looking to take. And certainly the approach and why organizations are bringing my business in Career Life Transitions with the Changing Gears program is to start opening that conversation, because as I said previously, mature age workers, it's not that they may want to continue working way past 65. Many of them think they don't have a choice, and starting to open up that conversation certainly has turned around the opinions of a number of people we've spoken to who have run through the workshop, where they're now saying, oh, I didn't realize I can actually retire. Actually, this is a very good option for me. And that's a natural transition. 30 years ago, you could, everyone knew when you got to 65, yep, there's a gold watch, there's the morning tea, we're out the door. That's not the case anymore. And I've seen, and we're working with retirees who are well into their mid-70s and still talking about giving it another couple of years. They will fall into the trap of basically handing over their active retirement in seeking building this nest egg, which and then end up this vortex. They may never actually end up spending it. But for the business, it represents a massive health and safety risk, and your workers' compensation claims will increase. So some interesting facts, and this is from World Health Organization, December 2017. Over 20%, whoop, I'm sorry, let me just go back up again. Over 20% of the aged workforce suffer from a mental or neurological disorder. That's excluding headache disorder. The 6.6% of all disability amongst people over 60 is attributed to mental and neurological disorders. So I'll leave you to read that. But as we move down and have a look at some of the Australian stats that are associated to that, workers' compensation on mental health claims averages 17 weeks of lost time and a median total cost of $27,700 for serious claims, compared to $10,700 for serious physical injury claims. So that's nearly 3 times as much for a workers' compensation claim on mental health compared to a physical injury claim. Allianz has had a look at it and said, if there is a mental health condition as a secondary following a physical injury claim, that it's 8 times more time off work than a primary physical injury claim. And then from the Mental Health Australia and KPMG in May 2017, investing money in this will give you a massive return on investment. $4.5 billion is wasted annually, and the return on investment ranges from $1.30 to $4.70 for every dollar spent in psychological conditioning and return to work programs, if they could be prevented. So there's some really interesting statistics and what have you coming out that says that we need to start seriously taking note of mental health issues in the workplace, and you should be seeing a lot more communications around that in the media and what have you. And that if you don't, you are setting yourself up for risk in the business. So your risks range from talent loss, knowledge retention, brand image, and work health and safety risks. They're the things that where people are moving on, leaving the business. If you're a brand, if you're not dealing with these things, there are so many opportunities these days for people to communicate to the broader community how they feel about working for your business. There is always that issue of knowledge retention. And as I say to some of the engineers I'm working with, some of this equipment, there are little tricks to the trade, little things you need to do to keep them going. And when someone walks away from that, just reading the manual isn't going to solve the problem. And I have heard of businesses having massive payouts in terms of having to rebuild things, restart things, readdress lots of issues around systems, process, procedure, and machinery where someone has left, and they don't know how to operate to the maximum. And we've already spoken about the work health and safety risk. So despite all this, we need to attract, support, and retain older workers. I guess that's the crux of it. But there is a lot of questions around ageism in Australia, and certainly in terms of me as a career coach, I try to put it out of people's minds when I'm speaking to a 55-year-old who can't get another job. But at the moment, we are the most resource constrained we've been for many, many, many years. And a lot of businesses having to either retain their older workforce or actually actively recruit and attract the older workforce because there just aren't the numbers there. So it's representing a risk, but dropping an older workforce into a environment that doesn't take into account those extra needs is potentially setting up a risk for the business. And they're the things you need to be paying attention to. So as I said, Joe, some real employee data. These are the results we're getting from the workshops we've been running over the last, this is actually just the last 6 months. Many participants were reluctant to talk to HR about their retirement plans as they fear their retirement process will be taken out of their control. Older workers are feeling guilty about holding on to a job in their 70s that stops a younger person moving into the role. But once again, they've made their retirement nest egg the focus. Their mental and physical health is a major concern for people over 55. A third of people were considering taking a break from work, not from work, from work, long service to get a feel for retirement. So a lot of people see retirement as a bit of a holiday, and you get the caravan, etc., and do 3 months around Australia, even a year around Australia. They come back. What do we do now? And I've spoken to many retirees who have spent 2 years in retirement, then gone and got another part-time job. And I've even spoken to people who don't actually know how to retire. We were talking to one large organization here where a fellow went into the HR manager and said, look, I've worked in this company for 45 years. I want to retire, but I don't know how to go about it. And I don't want to come to you and say I'm leaving the business because I feel like after 45 years that I'm actually quitting, which is not the case. Help me retire so I can leave the business with dignity and feel like there was some recognition of my contribution to this organization. So who wants what? Well, employers want a strategy to manage resources. They want a continuity of service and product that they're providing. They want to create a safe work environment, and they want to maintain a strong brand image. For the employers, they're just looking for fairness and equity, the choices, life stage planning. And for managers and supervisors, it's about information, support, decision and direction, and accountability. I was speaking to one lady who we're running one of the workshops, and she came up. So it's a wonderful workshop you run here. You're really contributing, because my mother worked for one of the large banks for 45 years, and they just came into it one day and said, we decided you're retiring next week. And after 45 years of the business, she actually felt like she had been fired. And this lady said it took her about 3 years to get over that sense of that contribution and support for the business, which was just, as she saw it, completely ripped away from her. So you need to be very careful about that exiting process. I mean, my organization are strong believers that you need to exit people from an organization, whether it's through retirement or whatever, with the same diligence and effort as you engage people into the business. So this is the career life transitions approach to dealing with the mature workforce, that you create that stakeholder buy-in through senior leadership, managers, supervisors, champions, employees, that the question becomes, or that whole issue becomes something that hits the table for discussion at the senior level in an organization, that the facts are on the table, the return on investment is on the table, the risk is on the table, and some real data is on the table, so that the business does start to manage its risks and manage its process moving forward. That you do some analytics workforce analysis, HR metrics, look at your workers' compensation, policy reviews, scenario planning. I mean, once you have stakeholder buy-in and what have you, what are the policies of your organization? Do you have a way we do these things? Do you have an approach which you can transition people out of the business? And there's lots and lots of options as to how to transition someone out of the business. Employee workshops restart that conversation with mature employees. And we, as I say, we're running these workshops, and without blowing our own trumpets too much, we are getting some fantastic accolades. 100% of people who attend the workshops are highly recommending other employees, and the mature employees do join and get the information we're providing. They're understanding attitudes and expectations of work and retirement and coaching interventions, things like that, that actually start that conversation, because there is a massive amount of fear going into retirement. And starting that conversation, having the employer supporting that process, has given people an enormous amount of comfort and enabled them to make some decisions. There needs to be the business planning around that, the impact of the human capital risk on the business, the scenario planning, setting priorities, policy refinement, and then moving into those tailored interventions. Have you asked your people how they would most like to transition out of the business? How do we manage that risk in terms of retention of information? How do you develop your supervisors and managers to have those conversations? How do you retain valuable information? And how do you look after that wellness and well-being of people within the organization? So this cycle through, which starts with the stakeholders, starts with getting all the facts on the table so we really know what we're dealing with here, opening up a conversation with the aging workforce, business planning, and looking at ways of which you can, of which there are many, you can start to transition people out of the business. And we'll look at a few of those in a minute. So what's in it for the employer? Well, they can resolve a pivotal mission critical issue. They can focus on high performance within the organization, that practical skills, knowledge transfer down through from leaving employees and senior employees to junior employees coming on, retaining good solid performance, albeit in a new environment which is safe and taking into account the older workforce, exiting people with dignity and respect, ensuring an across the board fit for work workforce, a time frame for the business to move on, flexibility in structure, and last but not least, some risk mitigation. That's important. What's in it for the employee? Well, it's that ability to retain the status quo as appropriate. Access to alternate work arrangements, job shift, ability to add value back via coaching and mentoring and developing young people coming in. A graceful and dignified exit where the brand of the organization is kept intact. Recognition of the contribution. When we talk and we ask, as I say, hundreds of people as to why they have stayed with the business. And some people have stayed with businesses 40, 45 years, why they've stayed with the businesses so long. Money does not come into it that often. It represents probably about 10% of the responses. 90% of the responses are around camaraderie. It's a great company to work for. They really looked after me. I love coming to work. They're challenging me. They're giving me a variety of work. And these are all the things that they need to replace when they move into retirement, which could be for the next 20 to 30 years. And it provides them with options that they feel like they're in control, that there may be some project work they can do. There's an opportunity for learning and upskilling. They may start their own little business and contract back to your organization or another organization. There's volunteering, there's pro bono work, there's social group activities, things like that, that support people into the retirement. So it becomes a more of a natural process rather than a sudden stop. I talked to one of the people. He was saying his mother-in-law was all kind of ready for retirement, but really hadn't thought about planning on it at all, and just decided, right, I'm going to retire next Friday, for example. And she just stopped work, and he said she went into a complete funk and had some real mental health issues that took her about 18 months to get by. She hadn't pre-planned her retirement. She wasn't looking ahead for that. She just thought she'd work it out when she left her employer. And that wasn't the case. She couldn't pull that together in time and suffered some major mental health issues because people really do underestimate the social, mental stimulation that they get just going for work, quite apart from the work that they're doing. So as I said to you, we've run just in the last 6 months quite a number of workshops, of which we've had well over 200 people attend those workshops. And these are some of the results of what people are talking about, what they're actually looking for. So key priorities are reduction of flexible working hours and the opportunity to work from home, which is being obviously massively accelerated due to the whole COVID situation. They're really screaming out and crying for retirement planning and financial education support. As I said to you, when I talk to these groups of people, 90% of them have no idea what super is and means, and they have no idea what Centrelink is or financial planning. So they're really flying blind. The big question that comes up constantly is how much is enough? When I ask them, well, how many of you have done a budget so you know how much it costs you to live per year? Once again, 90% of them haven't even done a budget. I mean, if you did a budget and then did the maths, the answer to how much is enough is quite clear. They're looking for accessing long service leave or other paid entitlements on a regular basis and systematic basis. So if they have long service leave where they may be able to reduce their time down to 3 days a week or 4 days a week, making those opportunities available to people in a certain age bracket is really important. Now, for the business, and I think this is probably what's probably most concerning of businesses, is that from our finding, 41 people that attended the program were looking to retire in 0 to 3 years, with a further 20% within 3 to 5 years. That represents over 60% looking to retire within 5 years. So is your business, if you have a business of 3,000 people, for example, let's say that 30% of those are over 55. That represents about 1,000 people. Are you ready to replace 600 people in the next 5 years in your business, especially if they're mission critical roles? There's a lot of complexity in business. There's there is a lot of knowledge stored within that group. As I said, the majority of participants had no real thoughts or vague idea about what retirement would mean financially. And participants would like to be involved in succession planning to pass on their knowledge and help develop employees as they go through job mentoring, sharing, things like that. So despite the fact that knowledge will power to us at a certain point in the organization, people really do want to look back on the contribution to the business and say, they recognize my contribution by asking me to develop someone else to do my role because my role is important. If you think about working for a company for 20 or 30 years and someone says, right, you're retiring next week, and you don't need to tell us anything about your job, we'll just get someone else in to do it. It's quite depressing. Having that recognition is part of it. I mean, even if it is a simplistic role and what have you, that maybe you could train someone up to do it. Think of the psychological and mental effect you're having on someone by closing them down by saying your job wasn't important, anyone could do it. So there is that interaction here, which is going to add enormous value to the way your employees see you interacting and working with that transition workforce. Now, this was very, very interesting. This actually came up on ABC this morning, and I thought I would just share it with you because, as I say, it fits with what we've been talking about. A 2020 Treasury review into retirement incomes found that most retirees are leaving the bulk of the wealth they had at retirement as bequests rather than spending it down. And that's the last line there. People have developed this idea that they've got to protect this principle. In other words, they seem to think they need $1, $2, $3 million in the bank, that $3 million stays there and they live off the interest they get from that on a year-to-year basis. But the reality is for most people, they can be drawing down on those savings safely throughout their retirement. As I say, that's come from Super Consumers Australia Director Xavier O'Halloran this morning. There's a real misconception there that I really need to build this massive nest egg and it needs to sit there and it needs to be big enough to earn 10% to give me $100,000 to live on. Where the actual fact are the statistics and what have you, and you can look up this article on ABC News this morning, is that most people are happily retired and reasonably well off at around $350,000 a year as that starting nest egg, as long as they're drawing down on that. So what are the crucial recurring themes here? Businesses who get on the front foot are better prepared. A mature age approach embedded in the strategy and business plans of an organization will set you up for success. Engaging third-party support takes the fear and concerns off both parties. As I said earlier, a lot of retirees are scared or concerned about talking to HR or even talking to their younger manager about retirement. Being open to different ways of working can actually create a number of opportunities for you moving forward, especially since that resource constraint, it may, the tap may open a little bit once the borders open, what have you, but the facts are people are living longer and there are more people moving into retirement than moving into the workforce. Involving senior leadership and planning is absolutely crucial, that the organization now looks at this as a way we go about doing business. This is the culture and the values we bring to bear in this business. Starting that conversation and listening to your aged employees is very, very important, and developing systematic models based on the analysis that you're doing. Integrating other approaches with other functions, creating policies and practices, looking at any approach through a well-being lens is very, very important, and support and encourage internal champions within the business. So the questions are you ready? Now here's a little bit of a checklist. Is your culture and values, do they celebrate aged workers' contribution with a view to exit them with dignity? Have you run the numbers? Do you understand your age and demographic profile? Do you understand what your workers' compensation assurance numbers look like for the older workforce? Do we want to attract and retain an older workforce? Are our policies, procedures, etc., in place to make that happen and make that successful and safe? Do we know where the next wave of our workforce is actually coming from? Are our hiring policies preventing age discrimination? Are our HR policies and procedures taking into account the aging workforce? Are our aging workforce policies in place and supported by managers and supervisors? Do we have a wellbeing or wellness program in place in the organisation? What have we thought about in terms of succession planning for high risk areas? And is knowledge retention important to the organisation and clear and understood and supported by management? Are the board and leadership team across this business case? Have we been able to present that at the highest level of the business? And do we have alternate work arrangements in place, including phased retirement options and, as I say, the various other ways in which people can transition throughout the business or outside of the business? So as I said, we run the Changing Gears program. This is a national program. Well over 7,000 people have been through this program over the years. It is massively supported by those that are attending it, and as a result of that, HR are getting a lot of positive feedback through it. It starts a conversation. It opens the dialogue in a safe environment, provides the aging workforce with knowledge and a baseline for the business, provides much needed information that goes far beyond super fund advice, gathers the business valuable information about the demographics and retirement intentions, highlights the issue and brings that activity into focus and starts to explore other options for you in your business. Okay, Charlene, I think that brings me to the end of the presentation. Do you want to jump online again? Here we go.
Hi, how are you going?
Good. Anybody got any questions at all?
No extra questions that come through this morning, Peter.
Okay. I think we've pretty much answered all the questions that people submitted previously. I'm not looking at any there that we haven't actually answered. So at this stage, does anybody else have any questions or anything they'd like to contribute? Thank you, Danielle. Yes, we will be sending a copy of the slides, and we also will be putting a copy of this webinar online, so you can play it to your other group. All right, Charlene, are we all done for the day, I think?
I think so. Thanks, Tamara and Danielle. Thank you for everybody who joined this morning.
Yeah, and thank you much. As I say, my name is Peter James. I'm the Director of Career Life Transitions. Please give us a call if you want to speak to us. Just drop us an email and we'd be more than happy to open up this conversation with you about how to engage and support your ageing workforce. Have a fabulous day and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.